December, and good morning to you. Welcome to the live. This is Estic Media on YouTube. Kindly subscribe if you haven't subscribed, or if you've not been following this channel before, please share the conversation we're going to be having here. That share the channel. All right, this is Estic Media, ESTIQMEDIA. A lot has actually been happening in Nigeria's political space and every other sector too. So ever since the whole Nigeria country designation of country of particular concern, a lot of issues have propped up, from security to economic management to a judicial system to the after effect of handling terrorism, to how terrorism is being treated, to marginalization, to restructuring conversations, to regional system of government, to party politics, to debilitating political structures, realignment happening. A lot has actually been transpiring in the past couple of months. All of this, anyways, everyone can actually attest is ahead of 2027. The All Progressives Congress seems to be quite set. They have put all their memorandum of operation together. The ambassadorial team meant to spearhead this have been set out, headed by the governor of Imo State, Hope Uzodinma. Buses have already been rolled out. All of the groundwork is already being done. While the opposition political parties, well, some of them are not really saying anything, but kind of on the ground, they're working. They want to avoid disruptions. But you'll be surprising that when you would think some certain loyalists of the president are already having some certain things on ground for him, some states are beginning to experience a resurgence of political instability. And why that is what we're going to be talking about this morning. And we're going to be talking about the situation in Rivers State. First of all, before we talk about the situation in Benin Republic, I'm sure we all know what happened on Saturday, prior Sunday. There was an almost military takeover in Benin Republic. They had even come on national television to announce that they had taken over the government. But thankfully, they were able to call on their regional support system, Nigeria being number one. Fighter jets were sent to take over the airspace to apprehend the military coup plotters. And so far, Benin Republic is now safe. But there are concerns and there are worries about countries that actually surround Nigeria being taken over by the military. Is a very huge warning to the Nigerian government, because the territories that border Nigeria, very close border, we share very close borders, are now being taken over by the military. And also these countries are experiencing serious insurgency attacks, which obviously has gotten into Nigeria's borders. We already know the pressure in the northern aspect, in the northern region. This is pressure coming from the Sahelian region, specifically states close to Maiduguri, Zamfara, and the likes, Niger, Cameroon, as well as Benin Republic. They all share borders. Burkina Faso, Mali, those northern axes really share borders with this country, and they're really fighting insurgency. So obviously, it will definitely penetrate the Nigerian borders. While Nigeria is trying to handle its own internal insecurity and also fight their external insecurity, basically with countries that border them going through the imbroglio, we're also having our own political issues. Like I said, 2026 I've assumed will be a year of the disruption. It's going to be a disruptor year. And what we think we know in the political space amongst the popular political actors, there's going to be a huge surprise from 2026. A lot of things are still being done in the low so that the current government of the day would not mutilate the effort of setting groundwork. However, let's look at the situation right now in Rivers State. There is barely 3 months, all right, after peace broke out between the Minister of the FCT and the political godson, Fubara. The political actors in Rivers State are now currently gearing up for another political crisis. And what is the problem? The members of the Rivers State House of Assembly, led by Speaker Martins Amaole, who are loyal to the FCT Minister, are set for another face-off with the governor. What happened? Now, you recall that the political conflict birthed by an intense battle between Fubara and Wike over the control of the state's political structure had erupted in late 2023, a few months after the governor assumed office. The face-off between the two leaders subsequently worsened in 2024 after the Martins Amaole-led members of the State Assembly joined the fight. What then happened? The defection did not go down well, as Fubara-backed members of the House on July 6, 2024 declared their seats vacant, escalating the political tension in the state. And then In July 27, 2025, Tinubu met with Fubara, Wike, and Amawole at the State House, where he brokered peace between the warriors. Now, barely 3 months after that, a fresh shot of the crisis started brewing in December 1st, 2025, when Amawole vehemently criticized Governor Fubara's administration, accusing the governor of neglecting public primary and secondary schools in the state. There was a viral video. In that viral video, Amawole could be heard saying that the decay under the government's watch is unacceptable and embarrassing. He said it was a sad commentary that public schools in the oil-rich state have deteriorated to the point where vandals have taken over school premises, pupils learn without teachers, and one teacher is forced to teach 2 classes simultaneously. Now, that was not the only thing that transpired. Barely after that particular situation where they were asking Fubara to make accountability for the monies that were left for him by Ibas, General Ibas, who was the person in charge of the state during the state of emergency declared in Rivers, you know that Fubara just assumed office. We don't know the magic that is meant to take place. They were asking him to make account of that money and what he's been doing with the money. All right. And for Amawole, he feels that the conversation and the concentration should be on their public educational system, that there is a decay in their public educational institutions. Their infrastructures are very poor, lack of teachers, proper well-trained teachers, obviously making the children distracted when they go to school. So obviously there are no proper educational materials. The infrastructure is not available. The establishment, which is the public institutions, are deteriorating. And even the teachers teaching, because they're not properly taken care of, they're literally just displaying a measure tutorial measures with these children. So they're tasking Fubara and what is his responsibility and what has he been doing since he resumed after the state of emergency. Now, you know that since Fubara resumed, he's been countering, being nice, being gentle, the whole situation, the PDP, he has not said anything. He's obviously backing whatever decision Wike makes. And we already know that all of this is ahead of 2027. Wike himself has said he and Fubara are in good terms. They're working together for the development of River State. But what is quite funny here is that there are still some issues. You can tell that Fubara can no longer speak on certain issues. Appointments cannot really be made without the approval of the House of Rep members who are 100% loyal to Wike. In other words, whatever appointment is made in Rivers must be in tandem with what Wike wants and must be in tandem with what the lawmakers want because they're backing Wike. So very recently, Wike was in the news, not for good reasons. I'm sure we all recall the whole Yerima imbroglio that talks that Wike has been in the news for terrible reasons or negative reasons and putting the Tinubu government in bad lights. Almost like, I can do what I want to do. You all cannot tell me what to do because I have the backing of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The tail point, actually, of the whole situation was the Yerima incident, which obviously shed a serious spotlight on Nyesom Wike. Now, after that, Wike came out to address the press of what truly transpired, the whole whatever breakdown of law and order, acquisition of land, taking over of properties, and even some retired soldiers were parts of what were involved in what happened. What I mean by involved, they were victims of the demolition of properties. We also all of that. And it now seemed like there was a cold war between Wike and some political elites who had worked in previous administrations, who were allocated this land. And these political elites we're referring to are not private individuals, but persons who had worked in the military. And these persons are not happy with how Wike has been going about doing things in Rivers, all in the name of I am close to Tinubu and I can do what I want to do. So after that incident, Wike piped down, really went off the radar. We didn't hear anything about him for a couple of weeks. No voice, no mention, no press coverage, no calling the press, nothing. So after this incident with Fubara and the lawmakers, the next thing we heard is that 16 of them have defected to the APC. When you have 16 lawmakers defecting to the APC, it tells you that Rivers seems to be officially an APC state. Notwithstanding the fact about this, one thing to note is Rivers, since the situation of the state of emergency was declared, they have been an APC state. You remember that these lawmakers verbally defected to the All Progressives Congress. It was when they realized that their seats could be declared vacant, and if INEC is to conduct another election, they may lose on all fronts. They were now in the middle of saying we're still in the PDP. So in other words, these guys have always told their allegiance with the All Progressives Congress. So they officially doing this is not surprising to a lot of onlookers. It's not surprising to a lot of persons who have been following the conversation on the timeline ever since the incident happened. Interestingly, Nigerians have also been following the conversation. They have not been left behind. So because of this, Fubara is now at a crossroad. For the lawmakers to do what they did by defecting and announcing they're going to the APC, and for more questions to rise up against the money that IBAS left for Fubara, obviously this has Wike's backing. Those lawmakers wouldn't have come up to start putting Fubara on the spotlight again if they had not had certain conversations with Wike, which he feels he expects them to put fire in Fubara's ass. So all of this is politics, but we've not heard Fubara say anything in regards to what these individuals have been displaying or what their attitude portends. Now, we have also not really heard anything from Rivers, that is the Riverians, the Rivers State indigents, the Rivers State residents. I think they're already used to the politics, so everyone is quiet for now. So long as there is no anarchy, breakdown, law and order, or administrative processes are not being disrupted. This is just what you call normal political situations. It's politics that is at play. But let's go into this. The 15 lawmakers who defected include the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Dumle Mao, known as Gokana, Major Jack Akukutoru, Linda Stewart, Franklin Mwabuchi, Azeru Okpara, Smart Adoki, Enemi George, Solomon Wami. Others are Afoji, Tekena Wellington, Lolo Okwede, Peter Abe, Arnold Dennis, Chimeze Nwankwo, and Ofix Kaban. So another sign of fresh crisis also emerged on Friday when suddenly the Assembly tackled the governor for delaying submission of a list of commissioner nominees for screening. Now, during the House first sitting following the suspension of the emergency rule in September 2025, the Assembly urged the governors to forward a list of commissioner nominees to ensure effective governance in the states. Fubara had earlier dismissed all these commissioners appointed during the height of the political crisis, as they were not screened by the constitutionally recognized Assembly as declared by the Supreme Court ruling. However, the governor has been unable to forward a fresh list of commissioner nominees to the House, which triggered a face-off. Remember, I told you earlier that it's not surprising to see what is actually happening in Rivers, because most decisions have already been made by Wike, and it is not surprising that the lawmakers are kowtowing to Wike's wants and needs. Now, some appointments were suggested to the executive governor, and that is Fubara, but Fubara has refused to assent or supposedly acknowledge these nominees. He wants to look through things. It's almost like I am the governor. You cannot impose on me whom to clear as a ministerial nominee in my own cabinet. You cannot be somewhere and determining for me who would work in my different parastatals and agencies or who would be my commissioner. That's it. So it's almost like Fubara does not have a say on some of these things. And so they are putting pressure. Now, he has to act as a governor who has the autonomy to make decisions, the autonomy to decide what happens in his government, and not some certain persons via proxy Wike telling him what to do. Because he has refused to assent to the nominees sent to him, because he wants to retain his power, at least have a sense of purpose in being in charge of his government, they are now putting fire up his A. Again, this is all politics. Obviously, these nominees designate are definitely persons from Wike's faction. They are Wike loyalists. We don't know if Fubara also likes these individuals or wants these individuals in the picture. In other words, what are we saying? All of this is a political face-off, and the recent attention on certain public infrastructure for education or whatever, all of that is just on the facial value, it's just on the surface. It's not necessarily the bone of contention. The bone of contention with these guys is because Fubara has refused to acknowledge or approve the list given to him for ministerial nominees in Rivers State. Obviously, these names are loyalists of Nyesom Wike. In other words, Fubara will be surrounded by these individuals who will give day-to-day briefings and updates to Nyesom Wike on the activities within the inner caucus in Rivers, which Fubara does not want. We also heard that there is an agreement that when Fubara returns, possibly he's only going to serve one term and not come back for a second term. In other words, that was the agreement. And the idea is to ensure that Fubara works with Wike to ensure Rivers is handed over to Tinubu in 2027. After that, the next governorship elections will be handpicked by Wike himself, who will do the exact bidding of Wike. The plan is, after the 2027 elections, after Wike's 8 years as FCT Minister is done, that is, if that position is retained after 2027, after that is done, Wike has a presidential ambition, but he needs money, he needs followers, he needs consistent stream of finance. So if he has his grip 100% in Rivers like Tinubu has in Lagos, whether he's in government actively or not, his political ambition will not be deterred. He can now work comfortably ahead of his personal agenda, which is a presidential candidate, either as a VP or president himself. To do that, you need money, and groundwork has already started for now. By working for Tinubu, by doing what Tinubu wants, there is a promise as to in 2031, any southern VP would be either Wike or any other person chosen or handpicked by Tinubu. That is a political plan. For that to take place, Wike needs income. Wike needs a stream of income. Wike needs money. And if he has his hands totally in the activities, political administration, financial inflow and outflow of money in Rivers State, if he has his people inside the cabinet, within the governor's house, within the governor's office, and in the conduct, supervising the conduct of the activities in Rivers, obviously Wike has his hands full on. He knows what to do and how to handle his business. All of this is politics. Maintain the flow of money. Monitor the flow of money, begin to set up your structures with the help of the person you stooge or puppet you put in the government house to activate your personal ambition. Precisely what takes place in Lagos, no doubt about that. And so right now, these nominees, ministerial nominees, sent to Fubara to acknowledge so that they can be given their designation. He has refused to do so, so the plan is to make his administration uncomfortable. Fubara has not officially declared as well if he is going to be part of the APC full on. But right now, the Senate, the House of Rep members, or in Rivers, supposedly are now APC members. So there's a huge issue. For the PDP as a political party, they're supposed to interfere in this whole thing because what's his name, Fubara, is a party member, right? Unfortunately, they cannot, because this is basically a Wike business. And right now, Wike has been expelled from the People's Democratic Party. He has set up his own faction. They had their board of trustees meeting yesterday. So the plan is, ahead of 2027, they are working. Wike already is trying to choose a presidential candidate, which not necessarily will be active, just to form as an opposition, because he's supposed to ensure that Tinubu arrives or gets to the presidential slot that has a clean slate win in 2027 with no obstructions. The plan, decimate the structure of the PDP or possibly disorient them instead of them putting groundwork together. He already anticipated all of the expulsion that just currently took place. He will set up his own faction of the PDP, modulate it. They would allow Tinubu win in 2027. Afterwards, he'll put the party together based on his own terms and condition, and then they can now begin work as PDP opposition. So they had their own factional board of trustees meeting yesterday. Wike, Samuel Ayamu, Saraki, and the others. I think I saw a couple of them yesterday in the news. That's the plan. And according to them, they're trying to reconcile warring factions or reconcile issues in the party so they can plan ahead for 2027. And I don't know what 2027 they are planning ahead for. Secondly, before the PDP expelled Wike and others, we heard that Wike gave them a condition. And the condition is that they must not present any presidential candidate for 2027, because the idea is to ensure that Tinubu remains in place. So the big question that a lot of persons are having or talking about is this: why would you decide for people whom they should choose or how they moderate their party politics? You are supposed to coordinate your party, be part of a strong, formidable opposition structure, but because you have a personal agenda, you want to floor your party members for yourself for 2027 ahead of your personal ambition for 2031. Nobody knows who has life. Anyway, it's an interesting moment. Trust me, the political conversation in Nigeria is interesting and sort of predictable, to be honest with you. But 2026 is a year of the disruptor. It's a disruptor year. So we're going to know more happenings in the political space. Now, I'm sure you heard about what happened in Benin Republic, right? And there was almost a coup. There was almost a takeover by the military in Benin Republic, which was quite embarrassing because we are hearing that it's a dangerous procession taking place, that most West African and Central African countries surrounding Nigeria are already in disarray and being taken over by the military. ECOWAS seems to be redundant and they're dead. Also, the African Union seems to be a body that is just there on paper, having countries that are part of their union with no effective stance in handling internal crisis in most African countries. We're seeing the Somalia crisis, we're seeing the Guinea-Bissau crisis, we're seeing the Sudan crisis. The African Union has not been able to broker peace. So what is the essence of the existence of the African Union? Very recently, Trump was the one that tried to broker peace in Somalia and is even looking into how to resolve the situation in Sudan. So what is the existence of the African Union as a body? As for ECOWAS, in the function or the existence of ECOWAS, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger Republic, Guinea-Bissau, these countries were taken over by the military and we had ECOWAS and they could not do anything about it. There is a deterioration in the strength of the economic of West African nations. They are more politicized than addressing issues in cohabitating, strengthening the borders that surrounds them and ensuring that they remain in a democracy. Unfortunately, they seem incapacitated, either that or they are financially porous, that they need to be in the good side of Nigeria in order to sustain themselves. It obviously feels like Nigeria is a country that's really sustaining the economic community of West African states. And if Nigeria itself, if its democratic institution is not strengthened, it is a debilitating moral aspect for ECOWAS to continue to exist as a union that supposedly has the strength to determine what takes place in the countries that are participants in the union. So because of that, the Yoruba nation, that is based on the failed coup in Benin Republic, they're telling the president to wake up. It's a wake-up call for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to take the plight of Nigerians seriously. This Yoruba union called Igbimo Majekubaje Ile Yoruba, they were the ones who actually made the statement. And it was made on Sunday by the group's convener, Olushola Badero, through its home director, Princess Balogun. The union expressed deep concerns over the growing disillusionment of Africans with political leaders who they say siphon public funds and push citizens into abject poverty. The union noted that for decades, Nigerians and other Africans have endured pain, suffering, and deprivation while receiving little or no benefit from democratic governance. Now, according to the group, the prolonged neglect has often made citizens in many West African countries more accepting of military interventions as a solution to political failures. The Yoruba Union warned that the Nigerian government must act fast and quickly to prevent a situation similar to what was witnessed in neighboring countries. urging the president to urgently address insecurity, the rising dropout rates among school children, and the reversal of per-people policies that have left millions of Nigerians vulnerable. So let's educate ourselves a little bit. As of 2025, right now, we have about 7 countries surrounding Nigeria's border that are being controlled by the military. One of them is Mali. Mali returned to entrenched military rule. They began with 2 coups in less than a year. The first in August 2020, which removed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, followed by another in May. Colonel Assimi Goïta, now a general, emerged as the central figure of the junta. And in 2025, the military leadership made its boldest move yet. Political parties were dissolved and a new law granted Goïta a 5-year renewable mandate without elections. Second is Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso experienced 2 swift coups in 2022, first bringing Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba to power, then placing Captain Ibrahim Traoré at the helm after accusing the previous leader of failing to tackle insecurity. Traoré has since consolidated power and framed his leadership as a patriotic mission to defend the country from jihadist violence. In 2024, a new transition charter was adopted, extending military rule for another 60 months from July that year. With this extension, Burkina Faso is set to remain under the junta control for several years. Civil liberties remain constrained, political activity is restricted, and critics continue to report on growing authoritarian tendencies within the ruling military council. Obviously, it's expected for authoritarian decisions to be made without the consent of the people because you are now in a military dispensation. Now, number 3 is Niger Republic. We all really know about how Niger Republic came about when General Abdurrahman Tichani and the presidential guard ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. The takeover triggered strong sanctions and condemnation from African and global partners, but these African and global partners could not do anything to prevent the military takeover. The 4th one is Guinea-Conakry. Guinea slipped into military rule in September 2021 when Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya led a special forces unit to remove President Alpha Conde, and the junta initially committed to a structured transition, yet timelines have shifted repeatedly, and in 2025, political uncertainty deepened. The 5th country is Sudan. Why? Sudan represents one of the most complicated military transitions in the continent. We already know the internal imbroglio they are going through and the crisis within Sudan, South Sudan, the breakaway faction of the country. And ever since then, they have not been able to be free, like independent. So in April 2023, for example, the country descended into a brutal civil war between the Sudanese armed forces led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the paramilitary rapid support forces under Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemeti. Hemeti rather. With rival forces controlling different territories, Sudan has no functioning civilian government. So I want you guys to understand what is happening. The next one is Madagascar. Madagascar is also an African nation. In October 2025, Madagascar dramatically joined the list of African countries under military rule. The 7th is Guinea-Bissau, became the most recent addition in November 2025, when military officers declared on national television that they had deposed President Umaru Sissoco Embalo. So what does this mean for Nigeria as a country? When you have your borders being circulated by countries already under the military junta, and you suppose that they being one of the greatest West African black nations, the widest actually, his supposed institutions are monitored by a couple of other countries that surround you, meaning that your democratic values and practice determines how the borders that surround you will continue their own governance administration. If your governance administration is not properly handled, then how do you expect to handle countries that border you? The only thing that transpired this weekend is the fact that if what happened in Benin had actually taken place, it was a dangerous, dangerous precedent, because Benin Republic literally is very close to Nigeria. In fact, they share borders somehow with, I think, Lagos thereabouts. Very, very close. That was a dangerous talisman. That would have been a dangerous precedent, and that would have set the African Union and the ECOWAS way back, because the union is existing with no power at all to control the governments that they are part of. There's a reason why Economic Community of West African Nations was set up. And there's also the reason why you have the African Union. Unfortunately, these unions have not been able to effectively handle issues within the countries that are their members, that you would always need the European intervention. In a time when African nations are continuing to clamp down on any form of colonialism. They no longer want any form of colonial intervention from their colonial masters, France, Britain, and the United States of America. Up till now, some West African countries, some Central African nations, and even some North and Southern African nations rely heavily on their colonial masters, the countries that had once controlled them. And despite all of the efforts to act like they are embracing democratic institutions in their governance to be able to handle their natural resources and govern their people, they have not been able to effectively do that, that they always need the intervention of their European counterparts. They have not debunked the claim that they still need their colonial masters to conduct activities propensiously or in a propensity or in a magnitude of structural democratic institutions within their domain countries. It is a sad precedent, and until something is done, we will continue to experience what is happening in these neighboring countries, and that is a big warning for Nigeria. Again, discussions are discussions, but if right measures are not taken, and if diplomatic relations are not strengthened, if the unions don't decide to be quite effective, we should experience more of this. Do you know why we will experience more of this? There is a jihadist movement in the Sahelian region, the region that is already militarized. The reason why the military came in this region is basically because of insecurities in their nations. They need the military to be at every outpost. And Nigeria is already going through that particular process. In other words, if the neighboring countries continue to descend into military administrations to handle the security situation in their countries, and Nigeria seems to be in the center of all of this, and they're not able to curtail their own internal democratic institutions, trust me, it is a dangerous thing, because the border will now be surrounded by serious insecurity apparatus, and it will no longer be something that Nigeria as a country can control. And trust me, there's what they call military influence. And if some persons are not happy with the administration of the president, there could be a cohabitation, or what I call it, a plan with these neighboring countries' military for another kind of practice, that kind of practice in Nigeria. So a lot of strong measures needs to be applied. And that is why the Yoruba Union is warning the president to be very, very careful in how he's handling his governance and the security situation in Nigeria. Okay, interesting. Now let's go on to the ADC and they setting up ahead of 2027 and Peter Obi being part of whatever the plan is. So the ADC recently gave Peter Obi an ultimatum telling him that Mr. Man, we love you, we like you, but you need to take a definitive stance in joining the ADC. You need to tell us if you're joining or not. We need to move ahead. Meanwhile, the ADC is forging other alliances. Other alliances not for anybody for Atiku Abubakar. Recently, Jonathan went to visit Atiku Abubakar. Also, Amaechi has been going out right now. We saw pictures of him having to collaborate with his northern counterparts. Amaechi has said he's not going to be the vice president or a VP to anybody. He intends to run as a presidential candidate. Amaechi is a full member of the ADC. Atiku Abubakar is now a full member of the ADC, as well as El Rufai. Peter Obi is the one who hasn't officially joined, but he is a member of the coalition. Now, Peter Obi had told us in October, that by November he'll be declaring the political party that he'll be part of, but we haven't heard anything about it yet. So while we're waiting for that, Peter Obi is still being consulted and trying to make up his mind, because he understands that he's in a very delicate position, and you can never tell the genuinity of anyone who is approaching you to join their political party. So Peter Obi is being extremely careful. Now, the African Democratic Congress asked him to take a definitive distance so they can start working for 2027. Remember, by 2026, a lot is going to take place, a lot will be divulged. Political parties who have been meeting in the US, in the UK, abroad, most of them have been having their meetings outside Nigeria, not in Nigeria. You already know that anytime they want to converge anywhere, if that state is the state that is controlled by the ruling party, there is definitely no security provider. They'll ask them to leave. Ever since 3 or 4 different incidents, especially with the ADC, like they have been meeting in abroad. They've been converging either in Dubai, US, UK, thereabout, to have their conversations and politically strategize. That's what they have all been doing. So Obi had expressed his reservations, but the reservation that everyone is talking about was from an interview that was granted months ago. But cable newspaper, I think cable news outlets, took the news like it was recent and made it seem like he had that interview last week, Wednesday, where Peter Obi said that, yes, he's a member of the coalition. He's still part of the Labour Party. The coalition is for good governance. It's all about good governance. He's not desperate to be a president, but that there are certain gray areas. There needs to be a decision made. There are some decisions they have not concluded, some findings that he wants them to finalize before he officially joins the ADC, but he's still a member of the coalition. That interview was had months ago, but it was brought up like a recent interview, which obviously set tongues wagging. So members of the ADC, the youth arm, and every other person went on space, that is Twitter, to start talking about Peter Obi's indecisive nature, or that he's been cunning, or he's been hypocritic. A couple of persons said he wants to be given an automatic ticket. He doesn't want to work for it. He doesn't want to galvanize for it. He wants people to do all the groundwork, and then he comes and they'll just give him the ticket. Others said that the kind of grace he got in 2023 is not the same thing now. The Labour Party gave him the platform, yes, the groundwork began, but it's not going to be like that in the ADC, that he needs to work. He needs to work to get it. If he doesn't work, he's not going to get it. So again, Peter Obi has not said anything. He has not made any disclosure yet, and it's obvious that he's been very careful. Now, some people already think he may not be running, even if he said he is going to run in 2027. So far, anyways, it's obvious that the APC, through the guise of acting like their ADC members, are the ones wanting Peter Obi to disclose what he's up to, and they want him to disclose how soon, if he's joining the ADC for now, or if he is just going to be part of the coalition, but going to run under another political party. They also want to know this because they have their plans. The plan is to disrupt the activities of whatever political party Peter Obi decides to join, and that is what he is trying to avoid. However, some people say that he is delaying so much. If he doesn't make his mind up as soon as possible, it will not be good for him, it will not be good for his political career, and it will discourage his followers. But the followers say they are not discouraged. They are waiting for him. Anytime he makes up his mind, anytime he declares, wherever it is he's going, they're going with him. The media movement, however, said they're setting up groundwork ahead to whether it's a Peter Obi or no Peter Obi. They believe that the structure is not a structure for Peter Obi alone. It's a structure that just basically wants good governance. While there's a cross-section of Nigerians that feel that any other person aside for Tinubu 2027, they don't care if the person will be competent. They don't care if the person will do anything good. They don't care if the person has an ideology that is people prioritized. They just want somebody different from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu because they feel that his administration is stifling. They feel that his administration is nepotistic, or they feel that his administration is clueless. While some people think that the reason why Tinubu is going through these challenges was because the 8 years of Buhari was nothing. He rendered most public sectors decrepit. Tinubu is starting afresh. That yes, it is painful, that but Nigerians are not patient for the experience to begin to manifest itself, and they feel that they are not being fair to Tinubu just 3 years into his administration, and everyone is expecting magic to happen when that's not how it works. However, the supporters of Tinubu are saying, we don't care how you guys want to interpret the whole scenario, the situation. We're in for Tinubu. We're going to support him. We're going hands-on, and he will come back in 2027. Now, what are the zones that seems to be on the lockdown for Tinubu in terms of the political big wigs already on ground? You have Rivers, you have the Southwest, you have the South. The Southeast is, for now, you can't generalize because you'd be so surprised that some people in the Southeast actually support President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, either because of some gains in the administration or party affiliation. But some people are actually supporting him from the Southeast. So it is the northern part. There are some aspects of the north that, yes, is on lockdown for him, and some aspects that he needs their full support. Because in 2023, the north gave Tinubu 63% of the vote. Otherwise, he wouldn't have emerged. So he wants to make sure that some northern states are locked down for him so that he can be very certain about 2027. So far, groundwork has begun. But the question a lot of Nigerians are asking is, should Atiku come out to campaign for 2027 when it's the turn of the South? Others are saying, who was the person that brought up this unconstitutional verbal gentleman agreement that it's supposed to rotate? It should be between the North and the South. For the South, the North is not meant to participate in any form of primaries. No candidate from the North is meant to be to emerge in any political party. The ought to be Southern candidates so that they could have a fair election. And after 2031, then the North can come do their thing. Others believe that anybody has the right to come out and campaign. And Atiku is likening himself to Abraham Lincoln, that Abraham Lincoln tried and failed several times. And then when he eventually became America's president, he was one of the best presidents America had. So the big question is, why do some Nigerians, why don't they trust Atiku? That's a big question. And also, why do some Nigerians feel that Atiku would not do right by them? Or could it be the fact that the whole idea is the Fulanis will always act like governance belongs to them or power belongs to them? Would that be one of the reasons why Atiku is a factor? Could it be all the things Obasanjo had said about Atiku? Is it his antecedents that are speaking for him, that somehow there's that lack of trust, or it's just a few people who trust him? Anyways, the political space is quite interesting, but some persons feel that certain actors that are prominent should speak up now. Omoyele Sowore is already galvanizing. He's having critical intellectual conversations, specifically with the youth, because they were the demography that broke the spectrum in 2023. And a lot of political parties are building with that demography, the youthful demography. They were the ones that caused what you call a political resurgence in 2023. That was why you saw active political participation. We have always had that demographic become apathetic towards political issues. They were never concerned, but somehow the Buhari administration was an eye-opener, and the EndSARS protests saw a lot of the young persons get themselves involved in politics. There was a resurgence, a reawakening. This demography were a strong instrument for how 2023 went on, and that was basically one of the strong components that brought peterobi as a wave in 2023. So is he harnessing that same demography for 2027? Has he left that movement on their own to flail in the wind while they just wait for him to give them any directive for them to steer in his direction? What is the ideology of these political parties actually that could be more progressive than what Tinubu claims that he has as a political ideology? All right. Like I said, these are very interesting conversations. The political space will be quite engaging and insightful. A lot of things will evolve and emerge. We get to find out as time goes on what will take place. So stay on to FCT Media, because we'll continue to give you updates about this. Share, like, subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful Monday.